I know it's a little different for some of us to talk about things on the right side before the left, but it seems more intuitive to me to now be able to move all the way down the left side of the screen rather than break it all up into multiple pieces. So, no matter how we got here, we're now ready to discuss what we see and can do with some of the features at the top and left sides of the SharePoint screen. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, we can see that there are some links. We can always get back to home. We can edit links. We can see the title of the page, and the title of the current page is You Got It Training. And we can also see tabs that are part of the ribbon. SharePoint 2013 uses the same ribbon interface as the rest of Office. So you can click or tap on Browse or Page or possibly other buttons that will show up in context and see different tools for working with SharePoint. The default is that the Browse tab is the one that's activated. There are a lot of different tools to see here, but honestly, most of them we won't be working with because this course focuses on using SharePoint, not designing it and not creating a lot of things. We will, however, be using the ribbon quite a bit in some of the future chapters. What I want to draw your attention to, though, is the most important, at least in my opinion, thing that you can use for navigation. How do we move around in SharePoint? And the easiest way to move around in SharePoint is to remember it's a web page, so it's filled with hyperlinks. The primary place you're going to find hyperlinks, of course, is at the very top, for example, going to Home, but also in the left side of the screen. This is known as the Quick Launch bar. Sometimes it's also called local navigation because what this quick launch bar shows you are all of the things that are in the current site. So we can see right away that there are libraries. There's a Site Pages library and a Shared Documents library. We can also see that there are lists. There's a calendar, a task list. There's a discussion board and a team discussion. At the very bottom, we find an option called Site Contents. This is actually a very important link as well, because not everything in the site displays in the quick launch bar. The designer or the administrator gets to determine what is shown on the left-hand side. Usually, it's going to be the most commonly used lists and libraries, but not everything. If you want to see the master table of contents of SharePoint, then you want to come all the way to the bottom of the quick launch and click or tap on Site Contents. This is going to open all site content, which does show you all of the content, or at least I should say, all of the content that you have permissions to at least read that are in this particular site. And what you can see is there's a whole lot more in this site than shows up in the quick launch. There's not just a calendar list and a task list and a discussion bar, there's also a links list. Site Pages did show up in the quick launch, but we can also see that there's an announcements list. We did get to see Shared Documents, but we can also see the task list, the calendar, site assets, here's the team discussion, and if we were to scroll down, we would even see the subsites that are below this particular site in the structure. By simply clicking on Site Content in the Quick Launch bar, we changed from our home page to the Site Contents page. It's simply a matter of clicking on hyperlinks to move around in SharePoint. So if we wanted to look at the calendar, we could likewise simply click or tap the calendar, either in the quick launch, or we could also click on it from Site Content. This displays the calendar, and we can see that there are a couple of different classes listed. There's a SharePoint 2013 Bootcamp, there's also an Access 2013 Advanced course, and a few other things that are currently on the schedule. Notice that the title of the page currently tells us what list we are in. In this case, it's the calendar. If you look at the ribbon, you'll see that we now have additional tabs at the top of the ribbon. Instead of just Browse and Page, we now have two tabs that are specific for the calendar. One called Events, that gives us options for working with calendar events, and the second one called Calendar, that lets us work with the calendar as a list itself. And of course, we can go back to Browse if we want to get back to that original screen we saw that included, among other things, a link that will take us home. There are actually several things that we could have done to get back home. We could have clicked on the logo. We could have clicked where it says You Got It Training at the top. We could have used some of our other navigation features, including the good old browser back button. We could have even typed in the original URL. In SharePoint, there are usually many ways to navigate around, and you'll find the one or two ways that you prefer. But they're almost all hyperlinks or browser options. And that's what makes it nice. There's really nothing new to learn here. All you need to do is get familiar kind of with the lay of the land so that you know where you want to go to find the content that you want. As I promised, SharePoint can be many layers of many lists and libraries and sites and pages, but it's also just a website. So all the tools that we know about navigating, like hyperlinks and URLs and even previous and next buttons, work the same way that we'd always expect them to. Now you know some of the first things that make SharePoint so wonderful. We can store and manage and find so much without having to really learn a whole lot more than most of us probably already know about using a browser. Once we have that URL and someone has given us permissions to access the site, we can begin using this powerful tool to manage our information with just a few comfortable clicks of the mouse. What you now know is that SharePoint is a website, so all the tools you normally use to work with web pages still work. SharePoint utilizes the familiar Office ribbon interface in which you can work with all of the content within SharePoint. There are areas at the top and top right of the screen that provide additional tools for navigation and personalization, including access to your My Site. Some of these include global navigation on the pages that allow you to move between sites. Sometimes you might see breadcrumbs near the top of pages that show you where you are within the SharePoint structure. The Quick Launch bar is a very popular technique that takes you to content within a specific site. And of course, all site content is like the table of contents for a site. If you don't see it in the Quick Launch, take a look in all site content. If you can't see it in either of those places, then you're either not in the right location or you don't have permissions to see it. Knowing just these few basic key concepts that remain the same no matter what the specific configuration of SharePoint is will help you be comfortable in all of the different SharePoint sites in which you work.